So in preparation for this morning, you sit down and you read the text, think about the text, you pray over the text, and having read and studied our passage for this morning from 1 Corinthians 3, 9 to 15, I contend that Paul's point is this. If the church is truly to be the family of God, it must recognize its servant roles and be built of the right material. So that was my conclusion. That's what came to my mind as I'm going over this passage. That also came to my mind. But just as this is kind of distracting. As I was studying this past week, the other thing that was distracting is that baseball season is here. And I kind of follow the Cleveland Indians right at the moment. And, you know, I kind of got itchy for baseball because the first few of their games were snowed out, colded out, rained out. So they finally started playing. So I started thinking about baseball. And so I was like, with baseball on my mind, one of the things that has come to my mind over the years is the thousands of different nicknames that baseball players have. So baseball players are known for their nicknames. One of those nicknames that some of you may be familiar is Tom Terrific. Tom Terrific. Well, Tom Terrific was a pitcher for the New York Mets. Did exceptionally well, especially in the World Series, and his name really is Tom Seaver. There's another nickname out there, Mr. October. Mr. October. And Mr. October referred to a gentleman by the name of Reggie Jackson, who always did well in October during the playoffs, and especially the World Series. If you're a Boston Red Sox fan, you might be familiar with Big Papi, okay, who happens to be David Ortiz. My favorite was a Texas Ranger Cleveland Indian player who went by the nickname the Human Rain Delay. And his name was really Mike Hargrove. Before every pitch, he would step out of the batter's box, he would tip his helmet, adjust his batting gloves, shift his belt, tug on his pants, straighten his shirt, and then step back into the box. So he was called the Human Rain Delay. Back in the 60s, a lot of people were familiar with the Say Hey Kid, Willie Mays. Willie Mays. And not only did players have nicknames, but even baseball teams have nicknames. The 1950 Phillies were known as the Whiz Kids. And of course, the New York Yankees are known as the Bronx Bombers. Now, when I was a boy, there were a lot of these nicknames that I heard as I was listening to KDKA. Well, in my home in Boardman, Ohio, I'd be listening to the Pittsburgh Pirate games, and I would hear such names as Scrap Iron, and Cobra, and Mad Dog, and Candyman, and Tiki, and Pops. And that team, that Pittsburgh Pirates team of 1979, beat the Big Red Machine, which was the Cincinnati Reds, so they could go on to the 1979 World Series. Now, the Pirates, playing Baltimore in the World Series that year, what a lot of folks remember about that team is not what actually transpired on the baseball field, but what happened in the locker room. For you see, I'll give you a hint. It had to do with music, and it had to do with a song. To give you another hint, Sister Sledge. You can remember Sister Sledge. If you do, you may have it. The song was entitled We Are Family. That popular disco song, it became the theme song of the 1979 Pittsburgh Pirates. It was a unifying factor, I believe, in their success in the 1979 World Series. Willie Pop Stargell was a dynamic, no-nonsense team captain, but he declared that song to be what the team was all about. Family. Playing together with unity. Playing non-selfishly. Sacrificing on behalf of your teammates. making winning and success their goal. And that's exactly what they did. The 1979 world champion Pittsburgh Pirates were indeed family. And that got me thinking about the church. What Paul says here in 1 Corinthians 3. You see, the church in Corinth, to whom Paul was writing 1 Corinthians chapter 3, that church was not unified. Actually, there were obvious divisions that were present in that Corinthian church. In fact, those divisions were a big part of the reason why Paul even wrote 1 Corinthians. This young church, which Paul, had founded, was fraught with self-centered division. Family unity was non-existent in that church. Indeed, division was the central problem in the Corinthian church. How does Paul describe the situation? Well, you have to go back and look at the first two chapters of 1 Corinthians. There he refers to the Christians in Corinth as infants, babies, little ones needing mother's milk and not solid food. In other words, Paul was describing that Corinthian church, those Christians there, saying that their spiritual faith was quite immature. Paul says to them, you're still in the flesh. You're still in the flesh. And when he says that, I think what he means is they were acting out of their own personal desires. They were being quite self-centered. They were not centered on Christ as they ought to be. And so what did that result in? Jealousy, bickering, infighting, quarreling, gossiping, favoritism. And these were all marks of that young congregation in Corinth. Paul says it in this way. I love these 5 words that Paul used. Behaving according to human inclination. Behaving according to human inclination. Paul sums it up pretty well, I think, in those words. Now, how this played out was in divisions within the church. We need a little background here to understand what was happening. Paul had come to Corinth on his second missionary journey, offering the good news of Jesus Christ. He came preaching peace and love and grace and mercy. And he came to Corinth, a cosmopolitan seaport, a city of corruption, wealth, scandal, idolatry, and immorality. Bible commentators often say that Corinth was like the modern-day Chicago. Stormy, husky, brawling. As usual, Paul began in that city by bringing his message to the synagogue. He brought it to the Jews first, preaching a message of peace. But his preaching eventually led to a riot among the Jews. They got quite upset. So what did Paul do? Did he leave town? No. He simply moved his teaching next door. Leaving the synagogue and starting the Corinthian church in the house of Titus Justus, a Roman citizen at the time. And Paul's purpose, you see, for this whole second missionary journey of his was to plant churches. That was his calling, to plant churches. And so he planted a church, a very small church there in Corinth. And once he had done that, he would leave town to go to another church to do what? Or another city to do what? To plant another church. His hope then, after he left, was that this small church in Corinth would grow. And indeed, 18 months later, he finds that in spite of opposition from the neighboring Jews, the church was thriving. The gospel had truly taken root in the heart of the lives of this small group of believers, and the church actually grew. And that's an exciting thing. But as the church grew in numbers, you know what else grew? Their problems. Problems always grow when you have more people. Now, it's important to get a handle on what was going on in this church to grasp Paul's message to them about obedience to Christ and unity. I mean, we've all been in different groups where some followed one person and others followed another. It could be a club, it could be a business, it happens in our schools, it even happens in a family. Well, this was the case here. Some Corinthian believers had pledged their allegiance to Paul, the founder of the church, and others were following a fellow by the name of Apollos. Now, who's Apollos? Apollos was a very good preacher, very charismatic, I suppose, a teacher of the scriptures who had come after Paul to the Corinthian church. Remember, Paul has already left town, so he can no longer speak for himself. And now, unfortunately, the church is divided, with some favoring Paul, others favoring Apollos. There's a potential split in a very young church. It's only been in existence 18 months. So as we begin reading in the 3rd chapter, that's what's going on in the background of this church. And Paul's instruction is simple and it's to the point. He uses the example of a garden. He says one person plants, another person waters, another brings the growth. And that's what has happened in Corinth. Paul tells them, I did the planting. I planted the church, yes. Apollos has come along and he's watering the church. But you know what the real focus ought to be on? It ought to be upon God, because it is God who brings the growth. And here's Paul's point. Apollos and I were only messengers. God should be your focus. Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior. And Paul's words are an example for us in 2016. We who comprise the church today are to work together. We are to be unified in our allegiance to Jesus Christ. We are the family of God. And so we should be sacrificing for one another, using our gifts and talents in every way that we can. Always putting others first so that we can have a victorious life together. And you know, when I say it that way, it kind of sounds an awful lot like what Pop Starger was saying to the 1979 Pirates in the clubhouse. Get unified, guys! We are family. And in the church, we are God's family. Well, let's move now from Pittsburgh to Chicago. You know, in Chicago, they have this stadium called Wrigley Field. It's built in 1914. 1914. When it was built, it wasn't old-fashioned. You realize that. But now it's old-fashioned, right? Along with Fenway Park in Boston, that's old-fashioned. You know what teams are doing today? In fact, Cleveland, a little bit more than a decade ago, they built a new stadium, but they built it to look old. They built it to look old. See, modern-day ballparks are being built that are meant to give you this feeling of oldness. But Wrigley is old because Wrigley is old. The outfield walls still have ivy, you know, all over them. The field has real grass. They've never brought in the artificial. For your baseball aficionados, the dimensions of Wrigley Field are 355 on the left field line, 400 in center, 353 down the right field. It seats under 40,000 people. That's not very many people. Tickets are hard to come by, even though this team never wins. But get this. People buy seats on the rooftops of surrounding buildings and watch the game from up there. Unfortunately, the last time the Cubs won a World Series, 1908. But this year, the Cubs are in first place. Okay, it's only April. But and it's a biggie. The Cubs make the World Series this year. I'm thinking again, it's going to be really cold. You know, it's usually in October. October in Chicago could be really cold. The weather was quite cold on June 3rd, 2003 in Chicago. Really cold Chicago evening. I mean, think about that. June 3rd, the temperatures were hovering around 38 degrees. 38 degrees. Only in Chicago does that happen in June, right? Cub fans were huddled under blankets. They were wearing winter coats. Hot chocolate, not beer, was selling like crazy. It would have been a forgettable evening. I mean, who wants to play baseball in 38-degree weather, except something happened in the second inning. A guy by the name of Sammy Sosa, he was a home run hitter and Cubs star, was at bat. It wasn't much, probably a 95-mile-per-hour fastball. He got his bat out there, hit a weak grounder. But what what happened was that when he hit the ball, his bat shattered. He was easily thrown out at first base. Home plate umpire, however, he just kind of lingered over to the bat, the broken bat, and he picked it up. And all of a sudden, he called his buddies, his other umpires together. They started having a meeting. Here comes Dusty Baker, the Chicago manager, out to talk to the umpire. He doesn't come shouting and yelling and waving his hands, protesting like most managers. No, he comes out with a concerned look on his face. Now, if you're sitting there at Wrigley Field, you have no idea what the umpires and the managers are talking about. That's the only thing I don't like about baseball. You never know what those guys are talking about. They could be setting up a date to go out to have dinner after the game, or talking about their family, showing them pictures. Who knows? So the fans in the stands get on their cell phones and they call home and say, "What are the announcers saying? What are the announcers saying?" Suddenly, Sosa, their star player, got tossed from the game. The game went on. But everybody's sitting there, why did Sammy get kicked out of the game? What did he do? Well, Sammy Sosa's broken bat revealed that he had put cork inside it. And that, my friends, is illegal. Some players, they'll hollow out their bats, they'll put cork in them, believing that that hard wood with light cork on the inside increases bat speed. And that's really what causes the ball to go further when it's hit, making it easier, supposedly, to hit home runs. So Sosa later defended himself, saying, "Oh, that's only one of my practice bats that I only use sometimes during practice. I mistakenly picked it up during the ball game. I never use a bat like that in the regular game." He declared that to the media. He even told that to the commissioner's office. So we'll come back to Sosa's bat in just a moment. But if you look at verse 9 in Paul's letter, he's reminding the Corinthian believers that we are God's servants working together. You are God's field, God's building. And what Paul says here is that when building a building, you build the foundation first. Of course you do. A solid foundation is needed for any new building. Upon it, you'll build with wood or bricks. You'll put shingles or tiles on the roof. Paul says that some buildings use gold, silver, precious stones, hay, straw. Those are the materials with which you build upon the foundation. But Paul says, beware of fire. Fire will destroy everything you've built. If and when there is a fire, some of these building materials will do better than others. But the foundation will stand the test regardless of the materials above it. The foundation is solid and it will still be. So Paul says to the Corinthians what he said to every other church he planted. Christ is our foundation. Like the great hymn that we sing today, the church's one foundation is Jesus Christ our Lord. And why is that important? Because the day when Christ returns is going to be like a day of fire. The question is, who will remain standing on the day of God's judgment? And Paul says there's three types of people who will be impacted by that day. There's going to be the unspiritual men and women who don't care about God, have want nothing to do with God, and Paul says they will perish. And there are Christians who will withstand the fire of judgment, but some of these builders are babies, like those in Corinth, whose spiritual faith is undeveloped. Christians who are not mature, who have not as of yet lived up to their faith potential, or fully appreciated life as Christ has offered it to us. Paul says they will be saved, but they will simply have missed out on so very, very much. And then there's the third group, the mature believers, those builders who have received great rewards of faith during their lifetime, and so too will they receive it in heaven. Three groups. You have to ask yourselves this morning, am I among the unspiritual? Am I one of the babes drinking spiritual milk? Or am I a mature Christian spiritually eating the solid food which the Scriptures offer? If we are family, do you understand that what we need to be doing is assisting one another to acquire maturity of faith? We need to go a little deeper. Let's look at Sammy Sosa and his batting. Was it simply a mistake that he hurriedly picked up the practice cork bat? Or had he been using this illegal equipment for years, padding his formidable statistics with it? I don't think we'll ever know. We'll never know for sure. You can draw your own. But maybe what we need to do is ask ourselves if we're like Sammy Sosa's back. On the outside, we look like a typical hickory, ash, or maple back. Solid, hard wood, through and through. People see us and think we have it all together. But all it takes is one 95-mile-per-hour fastball, a trial, a temptation in our life, a tribulation, and we crack, we splinter, we break. Why? Because it all depends on what's on the inside. It all depends what's on the inside. And I ask you, spiritually speaking, are you hickory wood through and through in a spiritual sense, or are you hollowed out core? With what materials are our spiritual lives built? You have to begin by asking, what is your foundation? Spiritually, we are mature. Or are some of us stinking? Cheating, cutting corners, hiding our shady behavior. See, when the fire or the testing comes, are we consumed, or do we have the faith to stand firm? This I do know. Everyone in this room is at a different point in our spiritual journey. And what we need from each other is support and encouragement, sometimes grace, sometimes mercy. We are God's family. We are working unselfishly together to encourage each other, to build one another up into the family of God. We do that each by using his or her own gifts and talents, offering our time to build a loving church on the foundation of faith that we have in Jesus Christ. Now, ideally, that sounds great, but remember what Paul pointed out, human inclination. All I'm saying is that no one is perfect. And when you are a part of the family, you need to remember that. See, what we're about today in God's house is coming together to remember Jesus, to remember his work on the cross for us. But also, we have to admit those times in our own lives, in our spiritual lives, when we've used corked bats in order to play the game of life. And we want to be forgiven so we can start again. Throw out those illegal spiritual bats and play the game of life right. Christ has to be our foundation. Christ has to be our purpose, our reason for living. And we want to grow in trusting him by eating the solid spiritual food that Christ offers us. Think Oral Hershiser. He's a great Dodgers pitcher who later helped, yes, the Cleveland Indians go deep into the playoffs. They came up short, okay, they didn't win, but they got there. Oral said this about the Christian life, and I quote him. The ability to honestly see yourself act, hear yourself talk, see the look on your own face, and answer the question, what's it like to live with me, is a very useful thing. See, maybe we need to do a difficult thing. We need to ask a trusted friend, a mentor, a coach, a spouse even, and not be defensive about the answer they give us, but we have to ask them what Oral says to ask. What's it like to live with me? And commit yourself to listen, not to do what Sammy Sosa tried to do and explain it away. But rather than complain or critique the other person or try to justify yourself to that person, simply listen and allow yourself to grow in your spiritual faith. We are family. The clubhouse was pretty quiet after Game 4 of the 1979 World Series. The Orioles, in this best-of-7 series, were up 3-1 over the Pirates, and the Pirates looked to be heading home after a great season, but without any World Series rings. Baltimore had been heavily favored. No one would be surprised if they won the World Series there in 1979. They only had to win one more game. Most Pittsburgh fans could see their Pirates in the locker room patting each other on the back saying, nice job, guys, great season, see you next spring in Florida, as it appeared as they were going to finish as runners-up that year. But that isn't what happened. Shortly after Game 4, what rang out in the locker room was, we are family. By what group? Sister Sledge? It was being played on a cassette tape. Do you remember those things? Being played on a cassette tape by William Pop Sargent. He had placed it in the far right corner of the locker room over by Kerry Wood and Corey Patterson's lockers. We are family. I like all my sisters and me. And the guys in the clubhouse, they got all fired up. They got really fired up. And the Pirate family went on to win Game 5. They went on to win Game 6. They went on to win Game 7. A feat accomplished only 6 other times in the history of the national pastime. We are family. It is a song that should be played and sung in every church across the land because we, the church, are sisters and brothers in Christ, striving to encourage and inspire one another to be all that God intends us to be. So let us always remember the we in We Are Family. The we represents the family of God. Sinners, yes, forgiven and made new by the love of Jesus Christ, who is and always will be the foundation of our faith. Amen.